Sylvester Stallone, the Hollywood legend known for his iconic roles in Rocky, Rambo, and countless action-packed films, had spent decades cementing himself as a symbol of resilience, hard work, and an unwavering never-give-up attitude. His name was synonymous with grit, determination, and overcoming the odds, both in his films and in his real life. But when a smug, self-righteous liberal talk show host attempted to humiliate him on national television, he delivered an epic clapback that not only silenced the host, but also went viral, sending shockwaves across social media and beyond. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. It all began when Stallone was invited onto The Truth Seat, a popular but notoriously partisan talk show hosted by Devin Hayes, a self-proclaimed intellectual and political commentator who had made a name for himself by grilling celebrities, particularly those who leaned even slightly conservative. His show had a reputation for being a platform where he would attempt to corner guests with loaded questions and grandiose virtue signaling, making himself appear morally superior. It wasn't the kind of place one would typically expect to see Stallone, who usually avoided overt political debates, preferring instead to focus on his career, his personal philosophies, and his inspirational journey from struggling actor to international superstar. Stallone, however, was never one to back down from a challenge. The moment he walked onto the set, dressed in a sharp navy blue suit with his signature confidence, the audience erupted in cheers. His presence alone commanded attention, a testament to the respect he had garnered over the years. Hayes, on the other hand, greeted him with a smirk, as if he had already planned the way he would dissect the action star. After some obligatory pleasantries, Hayes launched his attack. Sylvester, you've played a lot of hyper-masculine, gun-toting characters, and frankly, a lot of people would say that kind of representation fuels toxic masculinity. Do you ever worry that your movies contribute to a culture of violence and outdated ideals of manhood? Stallone didn't flinch. He let the question hang in the air for a moment, tilting his head slightly as if he were considering it. Then, with a measured tone, he replied, "You know, Devin, that's an interesting question, but let's break it down. If we're talking about violence in movies, we should also talk about The Godfather, Scarface, or even The Avengers. Are we saying that violence is only an issue when it comes from someone like me, someone who plays a hero who stands up for what's right, someone who embodies perseverance, discipline, and self-improvement?" Hayes blinked, clearly caught off guard. He hadn't expected Stallone to counter so eloquently. The audience murmured in agreement. "But more than that," Stallone continued, his voice steady, "what you're really asking is if I feel guilty about inspiring people. Because that's what my movies do. I've had veterans tell me that Rambo helped them process their trauma, that it made them feel seen. I've had kids tell me that Rocky gave them the motivation to chase their dreams when everyone doubted them. What you're calling toxic masculinity, I call resilience, responsibility, and standing up for yourself. And if that's outdated, then maybe we need to ask ourselves why we're discouraging those values in the first place." A loud cheer erupted from the audience. Hayes' smirk wavered, but he wasn't ready to concede just yet. He quickly pivoted. "That's all well and good, Sylvester, but in today's world, we're trying to move toward inclusivity and away from these rigid gender roles. Do you think there's a place for the kind of old-school masculinity that your movies represent? Or do you think it's time for society to evolve past that?" Stallone leaned forward slightly, his piercing gaze locking onto Hayes. "Evolve past what exactly? Hard work? Perseverance? Fighting for what you believe in? Because if that's what you mean by old-school masculinity, then I don't think we should be evolving past it. I think we should be holding on to it tighter than ever. The truth is, men and women alike benefit from those values. My daughters train in boxing because I want them to be strong and confident. My wife respects discipline and hard work because those values helped build the life we have. And if you think those things should be discarded, then you're asking people to weaken themselves, not strengthen themselves." The crowd erupted again, this time louder. Hayes was visibly sweating now, shifting in his chair. But Stallone wasn't finished. "You know, Devin, I came from nothing," Stallone said, his voice growing softer, more reflective. "I was a kid with a speech impediment, a guy who got turned down by every Hollywood studio, who was told I wasn't good looking enough, that I should give up. I had $106 in my bank account when I refused to sell the script for Rocky, unless I got to star in it. And because I stood my ground, because I didn't listen to people who told me what I could or couldn't be, I built a life that I'm proud of. Now, if you're saying that belief in yourself, that determination is somehow outdated, then I think we've lost our way. At this point, the audience was on its feet, clapping and cheering so loudly that the studio had to briefly pause for a commercial break. Hayes, looking like he had bitten off more than he could chew, attempted to regain his composure. But the damage was already done. After the show aired, clips of Stallone's responses flooded social media. Twitter exploded with praise for his unapologetic stance, with hashtags like #Stallone Clapback and #Rocky Mentality trending for days. Conservative and moderate commentators hailed him as a voice of reason, while even some liberal commentators admitted that his arguments were compelling. Memes of Stallone with captions like "Old school values never die" and "Be more Rocky" spread like wildfire. Even celebrities chimed in. Joe Rogan called the exchange one of the best shutdowns of modern nonsense I've seen in years. Chris Pratt tweeted, "Sylvester Stallone just gave a masterclass in what being a real role model looks like." Meanwhile, liberal figures attempted to downplay the moment, but the internet had already made its verdict. Stallone had walked into the lion's den and emerged victorious. For days, Hayes tried to do damage control, claiming that his intention had never been to attack Stallone but to engage in meaningful discourse. Few bought it. His show, once known for its gotcha-style interviews, now faced backlash from viewers who felt he had been exposed as a weak debater with no real argument. His ratings took a significant dip. Meanwhile, Stallone continued as he always had, unfazed, focused, and undeterred. He didn't need to go on a media tour to defend himself. He had spoken his truth, and the world had listened. Perhaps the greatest irony of all was that Hayes had intended to humiliate Stallone, to make him look outdated, irrelevant. Instead, he had unwittingly reinforced what people had known for decades. Sylvester Stallone was more than just an action hero. He was a fighter, not just in the ring or on the battlefield, but in life. And no amount of smug questioning or political posturing could take that away from him. As the viral moment continued to spread, the impact of Sylvester Stallone's powerful defense of traditional values and personal perseverance began resonating beyond social media. His words weren't just being quoted in entertainment circles, they were now being discussed on news segments, podcasts, and even by cultural analysts who saw this moment as a turning point in the ongoing debate about masculinity, resilience, and the shifting landscape of American ideals. In the days that followed, a variety of reactions emerged. Some critics on the far left scrambled to discredit Stallone's words, attempting to label them as dangerous nostalgia for outdated norms. However, their arguments struggled to gain traction because the majority of people, regardless of political affiliation, saw something undeniably inspiring in what Stallone had said. It wasn't about left or right. It was about the values of perseverance, discipline, and self-belief that had built success stories across generations. For many, Stallone's response had spoken directly to the quiet frustrations of those who felt their values were constantly being dismissed in modern discourse. His words reminded people that hard work, resilience, and responsibility were not partisan issues. They were universal principles that had shaped countless lives. His fans already knew this about him. His movies had long been testaments to the struggles of the underdog, but now, even those outside his usual audience were taking notice. Meanwhile, Devin Hayes found himself in an unfamiliar position. His show, The Truth Seat, had previously thrived on its ability to put celebrities in awkward, compromising positions, but this time, it had backfired spectacularly. Viewers began scrutinizing his past interviews, noting a pattern of ambush-style questioning that seemed more about grandstanding than genuine discussion. Hashtags like #DevinExposed and #HayesGotRocked trended alongside Stallone's name, and several clips of past interviews surfaced where Hayes had used similarly condescending tactics to try to humiliate other guests. The backlash against Hayes wasn't just coming from one side of the political spectrum. Even some of his usual supporters admitted that he had underestimated Stallone, and worse, that he had done so arrogantly. A particular clip that gained traction showed Hayes leaning back in his chair, smugly asking, "Do you think it's time for society to evolve past old-school masculinity?" Followed by Stallone's legendary response. The internet took that clip and ran with it, creating hundreds of memes with captions like, "When you try to flex but get knocked out instead," and "You come at Rocky, you best not miss." Corporate sponsors began quietly distancing themselves from the truth seat. A few advertisers pulled their funding, citing concerns that the show had become too divisive, a diplomatic way of saying they no longer wanted to be associated with what was now seen as a sinking ship. Hayes, desperate to regain credibility, attempted damage control. He released a statement saying that his goal had never been to attack Stallone, only to have an honest discussion about the evolution of media representation. But no one was buying it. The transparency of his attempt to salvage his reputation only made him seem more disingenuous. Meanwhile, Stallone, showing no interest in basking in the aftermath of his viral moment, continued with business as usual. He wasn't one to gloat or linger on controversy. Instead, he went back to work, promoting his upcoming projects and engaging with fans. When asked about the incident in a later interview, he simply shrugged and said, "Look, I just said what I believe. That's all. If people connected with it, great. If they didn't, that's okay too. But I'm not going to apologize for believing in hard work and self-respect." That statement alone earned him another wave of admiration. In a culture where celebrities often scramble to issue public apologies the moment they face any kind of backlash, Stallone's refusal to bend under pressure was seen as refreshing. He had nothing to apologize for, and he knew it. The ripple effects of his words extended beyond entertainment. Several cultural commentators and public intellectuals began referencing his viral moment as an example of how people were growing tired of forced ideological battles in mainstream media. Instead of engaging in divisive narratives, people wanted genuine conversations that didn't seek to shame or belittle others. A few days later, Joe Rogan invited Stallone onto the Joe Rogan Experience, where they had a long, in-depth conversation about Stallone's career, philosophy on life, and, of course, the now infamous interview with Hayes. Stallone reiterated his stance, explaining that he had no problem with evolving ideas, but that discarding discipline, perseverance, and self-reliance in the name of progress wasn't evolution, it was regression. "People don't become better by being told they don't have to work for what they want," he told Rogan. "They get better by embracing the struggle. I didn't get here because someone handed me a free pass. I got here because I refused to quit, no matter how many times people told me no. And that's not a masculine thing or a feminine thing, it's a human thing." Rogan nodded in agreement. "Yeah, man, that's what people connected with. That's why this thing blew up. Because people are tired of being told they shouldn't be tough or they shouldn't be strong. We need more of that mentality, not less." The interview became another viral sensation, amassing millions of views within the first 24 hours. People from all walks of life chimed in, sharing personal stories about how Stallone's movies had inspired them through tough times. Veterans spoke about how Rambo had helped them process their experiences. Young athletes shared how Rocky had given them the will to keep pushing forward when they felt like quitting. Single parents, business owners, students, people from all backgrounds found something in his words that resonated deeply. Meanwhile, Devin Hayes' situation continued to deteriorate. Within weeks, his ratings had plummeted by nearly 40%, a shocking drop that his network had not anticipated. Discussions began circulating that the Truth Seat might not survive beyond its current season. Despite attempts to book big-name guests to restore credibility, many celebrities were now hesitant to appear on his show, fearing that they would be set up for a similar spectacle. Eventually, Hayes issued a more direct statement on his show, attempting to reframe the entire incident. "In retrospect, my conversation with Sylvester Stallone has sparked an important debate," he said, trying to sound reflective. "While I may have approached it in a way that some found condescending, my goal has always been to challenge perspectives." But it was too little, too late. The damage was done, and the credibility he had once built was now irreversibly eroded. Stallone, on the other hand, didn't need to do anything to stay relevant. He wasn't chasing headlines. He was living his life, doing what he had always done, working hard, staying focused, and inspiring others simply by being himself. As the weeks turned into months, the memory of the viral moment remained, not as a controversy, but as a defining example of how one man's unwavering principles could cut through the noise of modern media. It was a testament to the idea that authenticity and resilience still mattered, that standing firm in one's beliefs was not something to be ashamed of, but something to be celebrated. The impact of the moment continued in subtle ways. Young men and women began revisiting Stallone's films with fresh eyes, finding new meaning in stories they had once taken for granted. Training montages from Rocky once again surged in popularity as people used them for motivation in their own personal struggles. And in a time when so many public figures seemed afraid to speak candidly, Stallone had reminded the world that sometimes the most powerful thing a person could do was simply refuse to back down. The viral moment would eventually fade, as all things do, but its effect would linger in the cultural consciousness. And as Stallone continued on with his legendary career, one thing remained certain. He didn't need a talk show host to validate his legacy. His life's work, and the millions of people he had inspired, had already done that for him. As the weeks turned into months, the aftershocks of Sylvester Stallone's viral clapback continued to ripple through Hollywood, the media, and even broader cultural discussions. What had started as a single television interview meant to corner him had instead turned into a defining moment of modern media pushback. Stallone had not only defended himself, but he had also inadvertently sparked a larger conversation about the nature of strength, perseverance, and the role of traditional values in a rapidly changing world. One of the most interesting developments following the incident was the shift in how certain celebrities and public figures approached interviews. Stallone's unflinching response to Devin Hayes' condescending questioning had emboldened others in the industry to speak more freely, without fear of being shamed or labeled for their beliefs. Several actors, athletes, and entrepreneurs who had once been hesitant to challenge mainstream narratives began pushing back against what they saw as manipulative, agenda-driven questioning in their own interviews. One such moment occurred when Mark Wahlberg appeared on a late-night talk show a few weeks after the Stallone interview. When the host jokingly implied that Wahlberg's Catholic faith was a bit outdated for the modern world, Wahlberg, rather than nervously laughing it off as some celebrities might have done in the past, calmly responded, "I don't think believing in discipline, family, and faith is outdated. It's what's gotten me through the toughest moments of my life. If that's old-fashioned, then I'm okay with that." The crowd erupted in applause, and comparisons were immediately drawn to Stallone's now legendary stance on traditional values. But the impact of Stallone's words wasn't just limited to Hollywood. It also reached the sports world, where many athletes had already been embracing the ethos of grit and resilience that Stallone embodied. UFC fighters, boxers, and NFL players began openly praising Stallone's comments, using his words as motivation. Conor McGregor tweeted, "Sly nailed it. Hard work, discipline, and belief in yourself never go out of style. That's the real warrior mentality." Meanwhile, Kobe Bryant's past interviews, in which he spoke about the Mamba mentality and the necessity of relentless perseverance, were resurfaced and juxtaposed with Stallone's remarks, further reinforcing the importance of the message. At the same time, Hollywood studios took notice. While progressive and identity-driven narratives had dominated mainstream filmmaking in recent years, executives now saw that there was still a massive audience hungry for stories of underdog triumph, personal responsibility, and good old-fashioned grit. This renewed interest led to the greenlighting of several new projects inspired by these values. A major production company announced plans to develop a new boxing drama centered around an old-school fighter navigating a modern world that had forgotten the value of hard work. Another studio reached out to Stallone himself, offering him the opportunity to develop a series that would highlight the stories of real-life figures who embodied the same spirit as Rocky Balboa: athletes, soldiers, entrepreneurs, and others who had overcome overwhelming odds. Stallone, however, was not interested in capitalizing on the moment for personal gain. He had always been about the work, not the spectacle. While he appreciated the sudden surge of admiration, he remained focused on his upcoming projects and personal endeavors. But he did take a moment to acknowledge the significance of what had happened, particularly in regard to how it had resonated with young men who felt they no longer had role models to look up to. "I think a lot of young people today are looking for guidance," Stallone said in an exclusive sit-down interview with Time magazine. "They want to know that it's okay to push themselves, to take responsibility for their lives, to strive for greatness. And for too long, they've been told that their ambition is a problem, that being strong is wrong. But life isn't about waiting for things to be handed to you. It's about fighting for what you believe in, even when the world tells you no. That statement alone resonated deeply with millions of young men who felt they had been dismissed or demonized for wanting to embody traditional values of strength and perseverance. Social media was flooded with messages from people who had been inspired to take action in their own lives, whether it was finally committing to their fitness goals, starting a business, or simply refusing to let negativity dictate their self-worth. A particularly touching story came from a young man named Jake Reynolds, a former high school wrestler who had lost his way after graduating. He had struggled with depression and lack of direction, spending most of his time scrolling through social media, feeling as though he had no purpose. But after seeing Stallone's viral moment, something clicked. He decided to get back into training, not just physically, but mentally as well. He started reading books on personal development, set clear goals for himself, and eventually earned a scholarship to a wrestling program he had previously given up on. Jake's story was just one of many. Across the internet, testimonials poured in from people who had been motivated by Stallone's words. From ex-military veterans reconnecting with their purpose to young entrepreneurs finally launching their businesses, it was clear that the moment had been more than just another celebrity controversy. It had sparked real, meaningful change. Meanwhile, Devin Hayes found himself in an increasingly precarious situation. His show's decline continued, and network executives began looking for ways to quietly move on from him without causing too much media attention. Rumors swirled that he might be replaced by a less divisive host, someone who could restore credibility to the show without alienating a large portion of the audience. Despite his attempts to reclaim his image, Hayes had become a cautionary tale about what happens when arrogance meets authenticity and loses. His last-ditch effort to recover came in the form of an op-ed, published in a major news outlet, in which he tried to frame the incident as a misunderstanding that had been blown out of proportion by social media. He claimed that his goal had never been to undermine Stallone, but to engage in thought-provoking dialogue. However, the public saw right through it. The article was met with widespread mockery, with people pointing out that it was Hayes himself who had turned the interview into an attempt to ridicule Stallone, and it was Stallone's unwavering conviction that had flipped the script. By the end of the year, the Truth Seat was quietly canceled. Hayes, once a rising star in the world of television punditry, faded into relative obscurity. His downfall wasn't just a result of the Stallone incident, it was the culmination of years of smug, condescending rhetoric that had finally met its match in a man who had no patience for pretentious posturing. Stallone, on the other hand, continued thriving. He remained the same dedicated actor, filmmaker, and inspiration that he had always been. The viral moment, while significant, did not define him. What defined him was his body of work, his relentless pursuit of excellence, and his ability to inspire millions without ever needing to seek validation from media elites. As time passed, people continued to reference the incident as a pivotal moment in the culture war of modern media. It was the moment when a Hollywood legend had refused to bow to narrative-driven interrogation, when he had stood his ground with dignity and wisdom, and when he had reminded the world that strength, true strength, wasn't about dominance or aggression, but about resilience, self-discipline, and unwavering belief in one's own principles. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of the viral moment was the reminder that the values Stallone had spoken about, hard work, perseverance, standing up for oneself, were not just relics of the past, they were timeless. And no matter how much certain forces tried to dismiss or undermine them, they would always remain at the heart of what made people strive for greatness. For Sylvester Stallone, the interview was just another day. For the world, it was a much-needed wake-up call. In the aftermath of his viral Clapback, Sylvester Stallone's legacy took on a renewed energy, transforming him from a Hollywood legend into something more. A cultural icon of resilience in an era that seemed increasingly hostile to traditional values. The incident served as a stark reminder that there was still a hunger for authenticity, for real stories of struggle and triumph, and for role models who didn't waver in their convictions. Hollywood studios, always quick to capitalize on shifting public sentiments, began pivoting toward narratives that embraced the themes of hard work, perseverance, and self-reliance. Scripts flooded into production offices with protagonists who embodied the classic underdog spirit: fighters, self made entrepreneurs, and characters who, rather than being handed victories, had to claw their way to success against overwhelming odds. The sudden shift was undeniable. Even industry insiders who had long dismissed such stories as outdated had to acknowledge that Stallone's moment had struck a nerve. Stallone, however, remained above the Hollywood politics. He wasn't interested in being the face of any movement. He had spent decades proving himself through action, not rhetoric. He had no time for grandstanding, no interest in ideological battles. He simply continued doing what he had always done: making films, training, and inspiring others through his own relentless drive. In fact, rather than taking a victory lap over the incident, he turned his attention to a new passion project, an autobiography unlike any he had written before. While Stallone had previously shared glimpses of his struggles in Hollywood, this book would dive deeper into the personal philosophy that had guided him through every hardship. Tentatively titled Going the Distance, it was part memoir, part motivational guide, detailing the principles that had shaped his life: perseverance, discipline, self-belief, and the importance of embracing struggle rather than avoiding it. The book's announcement alone generated massive anticipation. Fans, both old and new, eagerly awaited what was sure to be more than just another celebrity autobiography. This wasn't going to be a rehashing of his career highlights. It was going to be a masterclass in the mindset of a champion. Publishers scrambled for the rights, and within weeks, Going the Distance had already broken pre-sale records for a book in its category. Beyond Hollywood and publishing, Stallone's influence began reaching unexpected places. University professors referenced his words in lectures about resilience and personal responsibility. Motivational speakers incorporated his viral responses into their seminars. Even military leaders cited him in discussions about mental toughness, using his words as examples of the warrior mindset necessary for overcoming adversity. Through it all, Stallone remained as humble as ever. He wasn't looking to be a savior or a political figure. He was just a man who had fought for his dreams, and in doing so, had inspired millions to do the same. And as the world moved forward, one truth remained undeniable: Sylvester Stallone hadn't just won an interview. He had won the respect of an entire generation, proving that some values never go out of style. As the months passed, Sylvester Stallone's influence continued to grow in ways no one had anticipated. His words had sparked more than just a viral moment. They had become a rallying cry for those who believed in perseverance, self-improvement, and the undying spirit of the underdog. What had started as a sharp, decisive rebuttal on a talk show had evolved into something much bigger: a cultural resurgence of classic ideals that many thought had been forgotten. One of the most surprising developments was how deeply Stallone's words resonated with younger generations, particularly Gen Z and millennials. In an era where social media dominated the landscape, Stallone's messages of resilience and personal responsibility stood in stark contrast to the culture of instant gratification and entitlement that many felt had taken root. TikTok and Instagram became flooded with videos of young people discussing how Rocky and Rambo had inspired them, not just as movies but as blueprints for life. Influencers in the self-improvement and fitness communities embraced his philosophy, often quoting his now famous lines from The Interview. One particularly viral trend was the Stallone Mindset Challenge, where people pushed themselves to accomplish something difficult. A grueling workout, launching a business, learning a new skill, all while using clips of Stallone's films or his interview responses as motivation. The trend exploded, with millions of participants documenting their journeys, showing that his words weren't just being heard, they were being lived. Meanwhile, Stallone's reputation within Hollywood, already legendary, reached new heights. Directors and actors alike expressed newfound admiration for his authenticity. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, a longtime admirer of Stallone, publicly credited him as an inspiration, stating in an interview, "What Stallone did wasn't just about defending himself. It was about reminding people that hard work and perseverance will always matter. That's the kind of mindset that builds champions." Other stars followed suit, with many openly discussing how Stallone's career had motivated them to push forward when the odds were stacked against them. Amid this surge of attention, Stallone continued to live by the principles he had championed. He wasn't interested in riding the wave of internet fame. He had real work to do. He was deep in the production of a new film, one that he had poured his heart and soul into. A story about a struggling ex-fighter who mentors a troubled young athlete in the hopes of teaching him the value of hard work and discipline. The project was already being touted as a return to the kind of storytelling that had made Stallone a household name. Gritty, heartfelt, and inspiring. As the world moved on from the initial controversy, one thing remained clear. Stallone's impact was more profound than ever. He had reminded people that struggle was not something to be avoided, but embraced. That setbacks were merely setups for comebacks. That no matter how much the world changed, the principles of resilience, self-determination, and personal strength would always be relevant. And with that, Stallone had not just won a debate, he had reignited a movement. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on a liberal talk show host trying to humiliate Sylvester Stallone? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.